Council, that they will get it first, and if there have any objections to it being put on the website, they will indicate them to us, and I'm sure we will come to an accommodation so that if there is any issues about security and things like that, we can be sure that we don't trespass in that particular area. So I'm very pleased to say that that's what we're going to do on Wednesday. We will then resume the evidence again on Thursday. So what was scheduled to be on Wednesday will now be on Thursday. And then what was scheduled for Thursday will be put to the 5th of December. All right, so thank you very much for that.
Just one matter. I spoke to Mr. Peterson, and he has agreed that he will see about drafting the undertaking.
He's going to do it, is he?
Yeah.
Right, good. Well, that's even better. Saves you having to do one, right? Marvellous. Well, then I do ask Mr. Peterson if he'd like to address the commissioners.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and your fellow commissioner. I will do so not as extensively as I would like to. I will be short. But I first want to put on record and commend Mr. Maraj for putting all sides out there in the national community. I must express that I was a bit anxious when he was doing some, but I know he will eventually came to all, which is, at the end of the day, what is important. And as I say, the end of the day, it reminds me, sir, that at the end of this commission, I hope that you would have been able to fully discharge your terms of reference and be able to assist in uncovering how this incident happened and make recommendations for it not to reoccur. This commission, as you have said, Mr. Chairman, this morning, it's not about ascribing blame. It is about finding out what transpired and how it could be prevented in the future. This inquiry largely concerns an examination of the circumstances which led to the tragic loss of life of 4 employees of LMCS Limited, namely Kazim Ali Jr., Rishi Nagasa, Yusuf Henry, and Fazal Kurban, who were working on a line at Paria on the 25th of February 2022. Whilst these men were working, they were working as employees and under the direction and control of their employer, LMCS Limited, on that sea line riser, which is a facility owned by Paria Trading Company Limited. Those listening to the proceedings today will no doubt recall that from the time the men were first reported as missing at sea on February 25th, 2022, up until the 3rd of March, when the last bodies of the 4 men was recovered, stories about them and the ongoing attempts to find them and rescue them dominated both the print and electronic media. As events unfolded, much to the nation's collective despair, initial feelings of hope dissipated and ultimately gave way to an immense sense of loss as the true nature and extent of the tragedy became apparent. This loss was felt across the national community, and the grief occasioned by it endures even to today. And the video this morning, I saw, went a long way in reviving sad memories. The sense of loss experienced by the families of these men, their loved ones, and their colleagues is undoubtedly immeasurable. Mr. Chairman and fellow Commissioner, it is for this reason, and in honor and recognition of the lives of these men and the surviving diver, Mr. Christopher Budram, that both Paria and Heritage have voluntarily given their commitment to participate in this Commission of Inquiry, to assist the Commission in getting to the root cause of these unfortunate events. I must say that, as earlier indicated, the eventual declining of participating in the additional process of interviews is not intended in any way to frustrate the work of this Commission. In fact, my clear instructions are to assist fully with the terms of reference of this commission. Because as part of our consideration in not taking up that interview process is that we were of the view that what we did not say in the statement, we knew an opportunity would be given to say it live, under oath, in the witness box for the whole nation to see, so that the nation can ascertain what did transpire. As the Commission well knows, what happened on that fateful day and the reasons for it falls squarely in the terms of reference of this inquiry, and those, I have no doubt, will be determined. In this regard, and in keeping with the commitment of Paria and Heritage, the management and staff of these organizations have already provided this Commission with what we respectfully think are extensive statements and materials relative to the terms of reference under which this inquiry is operating. In addition, those persons from Paria and Heritage have also voluntarily given statements and have offered to come to the Commission and answer under oath any questions posed to them by the Commissioner and any other interested party given standing to pose those questions. It is hoped and indeed expected that the testimony of these persons will be illuminating and helpful. Their testimony will demonstrate not only to the Commission, but also to the national community that many of the unfortunate and inaccurate reports in the media to date, which heap blame, that word again, upon Paria or Heritage for the death of these men, were wholly not justified. The evidence which Paria has provided and which is supported by contemporaneous documentation will disclose a clear picture and will take those listening to the proceedings of this inquiry along a careful, structured journey to the truth. And that truth is to be determined by you, Mr. Chairman, and a fellow commissioner at the end of the day. But that journey will begin, as Mr. Maraj has started to set it out, and I was attracted to the order in which he did it. It will begin with the process by which LMCS, the employer of the deceased men, and Christopher Budram, was selected as the contractor to execute certain works on the pipeline in question. Then it will proceed to the award of the contract for those works to LMCS. A point to note, Mr. Chairman and fellow Commissioner, LMCS is a contractor with competencies in this area, or at least held themselves out so to be, which executed similar works for Paria, a point that we will wish to emphasize throughout this commission, and also a predecessor of Paria. The evidence would explain Paria's mandatory permit-to-work system, which all contractors, including LMCS, are required to abide by. The evidence will treat in detail with the events of the 25th of February 2022, when the men were first reported as missing. The evidence would reveal that LMCS wrongfully departed from the Paria's permit-to-work system. It will also reveal that what we consider, and I don't know the extent to which it falls within the term of reference, to find negligence on the part of LMCS and its personnel in the execution of the works on the 25th of February 2022. Thereafter, it will treat with the extensive and sustained efforts. The evidence will treat with the extensive and sustained efforts of Paria and Heritage under trying conditions to explore what feasible solutions were available to rescue these men against a ticking clock in circumstances where the clear responsibility for the safety of these men while undertaking the works in question was squarely that of LMCS, not Paria. And finally, that route of evidence will take us to the unfortunate stage of having to recover the bodies of these men. Paria's evidence will also highlight critical facts concerning the true nature and extent of the relationship between it and LMCS, and the responsibility for the safety of these men, about which there has been little national comment or attention thus far. That evidence will demonstrate, among other things, 1, that Paria did not have and did not need to have the expertise to undertake the specialist works which the deceased men were undertaking on the pipeline. That Paria, in the knowledge of it, that it lacked such knowledge and expertise and such skill, engaged a tendering process with a view to retaining the services of a suitable qualified contractor to execute the required works. The evidence will also show that pursuant to that process, and at the time it was undertaken by LMCS, the LMCS emerged as an experienced and qualified contractor with a proven track record of carrying out that type of work which the deceased men had undertaken. The evidence will also show that pursuant to Paria's contractual relationship with LMCS, LMCS was contractually responsible for providing an adequate system, supervision, labor, and material to undertake the said works. The evidence will demonstrate that the responsibility for the safety of the deceased men and Mr. Christopher Budram, while they were carrying out the works, rested squarely on the shoulders of LMCS, pursuant to its contractual obligations to Paria. And accordingly, any attempt to impose such responsibility upon Paria, in my respectful view, will be misplaced. Paria's witnesses will also provide the Commission with a detailed understanding of the permit to work regime at Paria, which is intended to control risks associated with works being carried out on Paria's compound, and the works in particular that were carried out by LMCS. The evidence will be led by Paria will show, the evidence to be led by Paria will show that each issued permit to work specifically identified the task which LMCS were required to undertake, and LMCS was required to operate within the parameters of the permits issued. All told, there were 5 permits to work, 3 of which pertained to berth 6, 1 pertained to berth 5, and 1 pertained to the Point-a-Pier Harbor. On the morning of the 25th of February, 2022, the permit of focus, in my respectful view, is permit to work number 9320. Mr. Maraj alluded to it in his opening. That being the main permit in relation to berth number 6, where the incident occurred. And that permit had list specific tasks to be undertaken. Some were to remove and install the 50-inch flange, remove and install the 30-inch riser pipe, remove 30-inch solid blank, and conduct pressure test on flank weld. Remove chamber and blank on the top of the new riser. Most notably, however, Mr. Chairman and fellow Commissioner, there was no job or task described on permit to work 9320 issued on that morning of the 25th of February 2022 that required the removal of either a mechanical plug or an inflatable plug, both of which were installed in the pipeline in the preceding days. Mr. Maraj gave the exact date this morning, in order to allow for the maintenance and repair works on the pipeline to be safely conducted. Such plugs, once securely placed, were intended to prevent the development of a combustible environment, since hot works were authorized under that permit to work. The plugs also were intended to prevent a toxic environment from developing, which could have been caused by the escape of gases from in the pipeline into the area of the hyperbaric chamber. where the LMCS employees would have been engaged in works. Glaringly, and I say glaringly, Section B1 to the Paria's said permit to work specifically required that a migration barrier was to be used. This precautionary requirement was an expressed and direct instruction inserted on the permit to work 9320, which was issued to LMCS workers by Paria Site Authority. Accordingly, it was plainly not in Paria's contemplation and could not, in my respectful view, reasonably be within Paria's contemplation that the mechanical plug and or the inflatable plug was to be removed by LMCS on the 25th of February 2022. No approval to do so had been applied for. No approval to do so had been given under Paria's permit to work system. Put differently, Paria was entirely in the dark as to the intended removal of the mechanical plug and the inflatable plug on that fateful day. Further, and in any event, Paria's evidence will demonstrate, and I hope clearly, that LMCS personnel removed the mechanical plug at the wrong time, out of the proper or correct sequence. And that fact, taken together with the additional fact that the attempt to remove the inflatable plug was done in a manner which was totally contrary to the manufacturer's specifications and or instructions. This combination of events, in my respectful submission, amounted to the main or dominant cause of the tragic loss of life, which occurred on that day, as well as the injuries sustained by Mr. Budram. The rescue operations. Such loss of life brought into sharp focus the emergency response of LMCS and Paria, which will naturally fall for consideration in this inquiry when you're discharging your terms of reference. In this connection, Paria will demonstrate that its tender process required LMCS, along with all other tenderers, to submit an emergency response plan or policy as part of its tender submissions. The evidence will disclose that the tender process envisaged by LMCS as the contractor undertaking the work was directly responsible for any immediate emergency response with appropriate follow-up support from Paria thereafter. To this end, LMCS was required to have, among other things, divers and other diving support equipment to facilitate an emergency response, an effective emergency response. Significantly, Paria's evidence will reveal that LMCS failed to notify Paria of the incident at the time it occurred, and that Paria, upon learning of the incident, actively pursued LMCS for information, with a view to providing the support and any resources that it could have deployed. Paria's representatives will testify that because of LMCS failure and or blatant refusal to provide information to Paria significantly impaired Paria's participation in the rescue process in the initial stages. Nonetheless, Paria mobilized its resources based on the limited information it had, convened its Incident Command Team, ICT, strategically deployed assets offshore, and stationed personnel on site to provide a real-time situation reported to feed its ICT team. Mr. Chairman, I pause on what I had submitted to say this. When I was listening to Mr. Maraj's presentation this morning, it dawned on me, if LMCS has, as the claim, been forthcoming with information and all knew, now everyone knew that the men were in the pipe when the incident occurred, why would everybody be searching out in the sea? Because there's clear evidence, uncontroverted, uncontradicted, that there was a wide sea search. If it was all common knowledge that when the incident occurred, that the men were sucked into the pipe, then it would be a mystery to explain why there would have been that extensive search at sea. The evidence will also show, Mr. Chairman, that Paria, acting responsibly, notified the relevant state agencies, including the Coast Guard, the Fire Services, and the Occupational Safety and Health Agency. Further, Paria's evidence will demonstrate that after it was discovered that the divers were in the pipe, its personnel tirelessly worked around the clock with a view to developing a plan with the assistance of relevant experts. And Mr. Maraj fully chronicled the extensive consultation that Paria deployed in trying to ascertain the advice as to what was the best method in order to rescue these men. But, Mr. Chairman, the efforts at that time had to be executed without putting other lives at risk at that stage. And that probably would explain the paragraph in Officer Hargrave's statement that they did not know the existing conditions in the pipeline at the material time. Had they just gone ahead and deployed men into that pipeline without knowledge or intel as to the condition of that pipeline, the terms of reference of this inquiry may be wider. Ultimately, despite the solicitation of expert advice from multiple sources, no safe or workable plan emerged which would have allowed for the extraction of the divers before their untimely demise. I pause here to say, when we were preparing submissions to the tribunal and looking at some of the material that had been for the commission and some of the material posted on the site, I asked members of the team, do we have anyone indicating in any statement that on the evening of the 25th of February 2022, that someone from any entity in Trinidad came up with a plan and says, this plan, I am aware that this plan is bound to work. I am aware of the conditions inside that pipe. I have done this before. I have seen men being rescued from a 30-inch pipe before. And this is how we go about it. I could find no such reference or evidence. But we still have some time, Mr. Chairman. It may come. In examining the actions of Paria's personnel, it is to be expected that this Honourable Commission and the public at large will have at the forefront of their respective minds that difficult decisions felt to be made in unprecedented circumstances on limited information in a compressed time frame and in a situation which was dynamic on that Friday evening. If the Commission examines the conduct of Paria's personnel through these lenses, as we submit it should, Paria is confident that its actions over the relevant period would be found to be reasonable, appropriate, well-intentioned, and beyond meaningful criticism if such a standard is to be achieved. It is useful to observe, Mr. Chairman and fellow Commissioner, that although the Commission will be told, consistent with earlier reports appearing in the press, that Paria actually prevented LMCS from conducting its own rescue operations in the pipeline, this simply is not true. Paria's witnesses will testify that although Paria, in an effort to guard against risk of injury or loss of life of additional personnel, not knowing the conditions within the pipeline, those conditions being unknown, did advise that individuals should not be entering the pipeline. The truth be told, that those instructions were disregarded and LMCS continued their efforts uninterrupted until nightfall. Indeed, it was during the course of this extremely high-risk activity that Christopher Budram was found. Mindful of its responsibility and having solicited expert advice widely, a decision ultimately, and this is no decision that would be made lightly, ultimately had to make a decision to move from and to transition from rescue to recovery. That is a decision which many people will not wish they will ever have to make, but it's one that fell on that occasion on members of Paria's staff to make. Paria will provide full details of the recovery efforts utilized by its employee and, most respectfully, the mechanism that will use to displace the contents of the pipe which resulted in the recovery of the last deceased person on the 3rd of March 2022. In conclusion, Mr. Chairman and fellow Commissioner, Mr. Wilson, while Paria and Heritage appreciate that this Commission of Inquiry brings little to no comfort to Christopher Budram and the families of the deceased, they recognize that it's an important exercise, that the facts as to what caused that tragic loss of life must be discovered, because as a nation, we need to know that we don't make this mistake again. Both Paria and Heritage are committed to this goal. Accordingly, affirm their commitment to assist in this exercise and to attend and give evidence. They do so in the sincere hope that the findings of this Honourable Commission will go some way towards avoiding any similar incident in the future, and expect that the Commissioners, with the assistance of Counsel to the Commission, will ensure that the fact-finding process will engage in, will approach this exercise with an open mind. I mean nothing when I say that. I just reaffirm it. I have utmost respect for Counsel to this Commission and confidence in this Commission, that it will approach it with an open mind and resist the natural inclination, because of the circumstances, or temptation to ascribe blame and rush to judgment. I say this with the greatest respect and deference to you, Mr. Chairman, and your fellow Commissioner. I thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Gilbertson. I wonder if I could please just ask you a couple of questions about the evidence that you're proposing to call, because you'll understand that we don't have the full picture at the moment, and I'm assuming that you do. So you said earlier that, and I quote, you said, Paria was entirely in the dark as to the intended removal of the mechanical plug and the inflatable plug on that fateful day.
And that one,
now,
yes.
and I understand what you're saying, so that is obviously an issue we're going to have to determine. Can I ask you this, though? Is it going to be part of your case, in respect to your client, that Paria didn't or were not obliged to exercise any oversight over that particular job at that particular time?
Well, so the difficulty with that, and that is a fair question, the difficulty with that is that this is a highly specialized exercise, and Paria, realizing that it did not have the internal knowledge and skill to execute the work, that's why they went to the market, and that is why LMCS, having a track record of similar works, was retained.
I'm not sure it really answers my question. I just want to know whether or not it is part of your case, or will be part of your case, that Paria did or did not have direct oversight on whether the plugs were removed or not removed. I just want to know whether you say they did or they didn't, or they didn't feel they needed to because they had somebody else doing that job. I just don't know.
Well, so that's the difficulty that I'm having with. I understand the question, I understand the need for the question, but the term direct oversight, is it? I don't want to be asking the Commissioner a question, but I don't understand.
No, feel free.
Yeah.
We're not in court. This is an inquiry, so feel free, please.
But that's. They will have general, because it's on their compound, they will have general supervisory oversight. But with respect to the technical stages as to how a plug to be removed and when it's to be removed, I think that was totally within the bosom of LMCS.
Right.
But to answer your question, there will be some residual supervisory oversight.
Residual supervisory oversight.
That will be of a general nature, not with the highly technical aspects of the job.
General nature.
That's why they went out.
Of a general nature. Well, you said generally oversight of a residual supervisory.
Yes.
Oversight.
That's why they went out for technical assistance. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, unless I could...
Thank you. No, I think there was one other. Just give me 1 second. It was on it. Oh, yeah. Only this. You also said that, that nobody really knew what the position was inside the pipe because, well, we've heard already evidence about putting down various cameras and crawlers and things of that kind to see what the conditions were. We've seen some of the footage, haven't we? But in a sense, when Mr. Boudram came out of the pipe and was telling everybody, look, they're alive, what was done at that stage to try and find out from him what the condition of the pipe was? I mean, there you had somebody who literally travelled the length of the pipe.
Yes, well, it could not travel in length.
Well, the length of the pipe where they were, because we've heard they were all pretty much together to start with.
Well, so I heard that. I heard that that recording, that video, for the first time this morning. So I need to digest that. Sure. But Mr. Boudram came out and he was taken to the hospital, and that's when he was contacted by phone to try to give some information. And I'm sure what he said would have been a factor that would have been factored in putting together the picture as to what the condition in that pipe was. And in fact, the footage that was shown, the last set of footage, to my mind, was clearly demonstrative of the condition within that pipe. We saw debris, we saw blockage, we saw, I think that tape or that video would be viewed again in this commission to determine what the conditions were. But that tape, which came after Mr. Boudram came out, all of those pieces put together will then be in developing the intelligence as to what the condition in the pipe would have been. And that is probably why the Coast Guard was advising that they are not sending in the men. Eastern decided they're not sending in the men. It's too risky.
Well, I think we can all understand that. Yes. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you much. Yes. Ms. Prasad Maharaj, have you managed to condense this?
I have certainly done so,
Oh,
for the benefit of all.
I see that it's 5-3. And do you think you'll be able to conclude by 3:30?
Certainly. I don't intend to spend too long. My learned friend for the council has done an excellent job in summarizing all of the relevant...
Don't over-flatter him, all right?
all of the relevant information that inevitably is also before the public via the site, so that for those interested who would like to investigate the gamut and the extent and the intricacies of what has been said, certainly any interested person
so they can wade through the 20,000 pages as well.
So
yes.
do, which is why we're here and which is why I know the esteemed chairman has allowed us the opportunity to give an opening, and I thank you for that opportunity. LMCS was one of 259 applicants who applied for permanent registration with Paria, and that is for the purpose of being able to perform, to be considered for the purposes of contract awards. There is no contention in relation to the fact that LMCS has been awarded the contract that part of which forms the incident which took place on the 25th of February at berth number 6. What we all would wish to have an appreciation of is the process involved in the performance of the work by LMCS or any other persons for that matter. An award of the contract is not the end or the beginning or all that matters in this type of, in the oil and gas industry at Paria. In fact, there is a mechanism that is enabled, and both of my friends would have touched on that when they talk about the method statement or when they would have alluded to the fact that LMCS has not provided something or the other, or they have not had some detail or the other in this method statement. And what really is that? The mechanism that is triggered by the proposal in the tender is such that the contractor would present a methodology as to what works are to be done. That methodology is what is called a method statement. It is not a statement that is incredibly detailed and fleshed out, and that there is a process that occurs after the award of the contract. So at the stage where the tender or the proposal has been made to the tender, there would be a general and broad methodology of what works are going to, or how the works are going to be performed. Thereafter, there is a collaborative effort in the development and the fleshing out, as if I may say so, of the method statement. And what does that process entail? Well, along with Paria, by means of meetings and emails, telephone calls, the method statement in relation to what and how the work is to be done is finalized and then approved. I pause to say this very clearly. No work can be done in Paria, notwithstanding a methodology presented with the proposal and the acceptance of that contract, without an approved method statement. The method statement is one of many documents that are required to be prepared in relation to the performance of the contract. Along with the method statement, there is a job hazard analysis and a risk assessment. And these essentially would be formulated as a result of what it is that they're supposed to do in terms of the methodology stipulated in the method statement. In addition, and in support of the method statement on JHAs, the job hazard analysis, written aspect of the job performance is, if I may call, an ancillary arm of the performance of the contract in the format of HSC. That's Health, Safety, and Environment Monitoring and Risk System. And what do I mean by that? Chairman would have recalled this morning Mr. Senior explaining about something called a toolbox. That's essentially part and parcel of what the HSC department is responsible for in relation to the performance of the work. So now we have, when we have already settled on the methodology, method statement, and all of the risk has been understood, we have now the performance to be done based on what it is that we have in front of us in relation to the work that we're contracted for. In this regard, before any worker proceeds to go on to do what he or she is being called upon to do on any given day, there is a system of checks and balances, as well as a detailed discussion that takes place amongst personnel performing the work for the day. The evidence of all of this process, or all of the details of this process, has been outlined in the evidence of Ahmed Ali, Victor Dilpal, Andrew Farah, and Beverly Howe from LMCS. Those statements taken as a whole and together would give us a clear picture of the entirety or the gamut of that process and how it happens. The HSC department is not only from the contractor, meaning LMCS, but there is also a countervailing department from Paria, which is also armed with the information in relation to the job to be performed. And they are also part and parcel of the monitoring system in relation to the work to be done. And it's important that an appreciation of that is had, because there is something called a stop policy. And what is a stop policy? Essentially, if there is a derogation or if there's some kind of variation from what has to be done, what was discussed to be carried out, or what ought to be done, then Paria, or through their HSC officer monitoring the works to be done, has the right to stop all works.
Can I ask you, what are you saying about that in relation to whose responsibility it was? Are you able to identify whose responsibility you say they had?
They had the responsibility to stop if it is that Paria is saying to this commission that LMCS was doing something that it ought not to be doing. That is the removal of the plugs. They were there, they were present, or some member of Paria was present, observing the work that were being carried out within the chamber.
Whoever that person was, is it your case then?
That person was Mr. Kirk Scott.
Right.
Kirk Scott.
Kirk Scott.
I don't believe he had provided a...
He's from Hanson or Henson, isn't he?
Kenson, which is a contracted
Close.
party for the purpose of HSE,
right.
On behalf of Paria.
Okay, so that I understand what you're saying.
Yes.
You're saying, contrary to what we've just heard, that the responsibility for ensuring the stages of work is being overseen by somebody, and you say that's this Kurt Scott character from Henson.
It falls on Paria.
Employed by, well, I don't think directly, indirectly employed by Paria, is that right? They're a subcontractor also.
Well, there would be a structure within his employment with
Right.
Ketson, but ultimately,
whichever way.
It pulls back and the arrow points towards
whoever it is and however it works.
Paria.
Your case is
yes,
that was under the control of Paria,
certainly,
and that they had the power and should have exercised it to stop. Is that what you're saying?
Certainly, I'm saying that.
Right.
And the evidence that is before this commission, we would demonstrate that Paria had, in fact, utilized its stop work policy at various points in time, well, at least on one occasion, and had gone into an investigation of the, this is the incident alluded to by my learned friend in relation to the barge being taken out to berth without having permit. So it is directly demonstrating that incident that Paria has that control mechanism, and they have used it in this contract.
And are you saying they should have and they didn't?
Well, they are saying that we ought not to have pulled the plug.
Right.
So if it is that we're not supposed to, there were two plugs, and I don't wish to go back through what my learned friend has said, but we're aware that there were two plugs, and it's not a simple plug that we can just simply pull. These things take process. There is an unbolting process, and it takes some time. And the evidence will demonstrate that when somebody is observing that, they had the moment to say this is work that ought not to be carried out. But no such stop was made at the point in time. It is only upon the second plug being taken out that the incident occurred. So one plug was already out when the incident had occurred.
Well, both plugs were out.
One plug was completely out and had gone to the seabed. And they were in the process of taking out the inflatable plug, which is the first and the lower of the two.
Oh, I'm with you. Right.
Yes?
Yeah. It had been deflated.
Pardon?
It had been deflated.
It was in the process of being deflated, if I can recall the evidence correctly, please.
Yeah, well, I think it went down a lot.
Yes. But we will also hear in the evidence in relation to assumptions that were made on that plug later on.
Okay.
And this is perhaps going into the details of the evidence that the commission
I don't want to
get.
I'm sorry, I sidetracked you from.
Yes.
I just want, because obviously I was asking,
Yes.
I was asking Mr. Gilbertson what the position was, what he said about oversight, and you were touching on it. I just wanted to be clear about what you're saying and what he's saying. Do you follow?
Certainly.
All right, so please carry on where you left.
So in addition to the system that I've just outlined, there is the Paria permit to work system that we've heard about. The Paria permit to work system, the PTW system, is inherent to Paria's structure and procedure. Before the company can have that a permit to work, their officers need to be trained in the permit to work system. So in order to co-sign or countersign the permit that is issued to them. So Paria has its own training in relation to to their permit to work system. And this permit to work system now is secondary or second or additional to the system is in place in relation to the statement and the job hazard and the stop work policies that are usually employed in these kinds of contracts. The permit to work system incorporates, however, the method statement and the JHAs, so that this permit to work is a document and it is part and parcel of the proceedings before this Honorable Commission, where the method statement for the works and the details of the work that has to be carried out is usually in that document, together with whatever hazards and whatever risks are associated with the job to be done on that day. That is important for us to understand, because Paria is saying, by the evidence that they have put and what Council has said today, that the permit to work system that they have and the permit that was issued did not authorize the work that was done. We will demonstrate differently. As explained earlier, in relation to this, in relation to the methodology or the method statement that was presented, a comprehensive understanding of the steps was discussed. In addition to discussion and having the steps pointed out in a document attached to the permit to work, we have email correspondence, and there would have been telephone conversations, etc., in relation to the mechanisms or the steps that had to have been employed on that day. So to say now that they were not supposed to pull that plug would indeed be a surprise to us, having regard to all of the stages and checks and balances that LMCS would have gone through during the performance of this contract. The incident happened. If it didn't, this Honorable Commission would not have been commissioned, perhaps. But an incident happened. And unfortunately, the cause of that incident has to be probed. Much has been placed before the Commission in relation to something called Delta P, or the deferential pressure. In the statement of Kazim Ali Sr., who was the lead engineer and who has considered in his method, in the preparation of the method statement, the methodology to be employed, he explains and he goes into his evidence and has also supplied to the Commission a picture diagram of a model created by him in relation to the information supplied to LMCS and during the course of the invitation to bid, which formed the basis of his preparation of the method statement. That is important because there are certain assumptions that have been made in relation to the expert opinion and the expert report that has found itself before this Commission for its consideration. The sole survivor of the incident, upon being saved, said clearly to the persons present that the men were alive in an air pocket. There are variations of what was said, but what we understand from the evidence that is before the Commission was that the men were alive and there was an air pocket. In that model prepared by Mr. Kazim Ali Sr., the Commission would be able to follow his train of thought in relation to the advent of air pockets in circumstances where there ought not to have been any, given the model and the information provided in the scope of works by Paria. So in relation to what or how it has happened, we have not put before this Commission a root cause to say this is exactly how it has happened. But what we have done which the expert report has thus far failed to address, is the issue of the air pockets. And I bring that to the attention of the Commission because this is an issue that has to be looked at in detail, in considering and in discharge in the terms of reference that is before the Commission.
In relation to those air pockets,
Yes.
Mr. Boudram makes it clear
Yes.
that there's one section of the pipe that he was in that was completely dry.
Yes, yes. And the expert report that we have before us has not factored that in any meaningful way, if at all. And that is something that certainly needs further investigation and inquiry.
Well, I should be interested to hear your theory on it.
Well, it wouldn't be my theory, I assure you. I have no expertise in the area, which is why I have pointed, Mr. Commissioner, to what Mr. Kazim Ali has said. And certainly at the time of him giving his evidence, which is to be had, I think that would be Thursday now, Mr. Ali would be here. He was scheduled for Wednesday, so it should now be Thursday. Certainly that can be explored in relation to the air pockets, those issues. I don't intend to go back through what my learned friends have said. I think the Commission has had a clear understanding, and I think I assume that the public has an understanding of the layout and the construct within which this contract and these workers were subjected to. And it was done beautifully in a manner that we can appreciate through actual pictures and videos, etc. What I would like to say in closing, however, is that this Commission is tasked with looking into all of the circumstances leading to the death of Kazim Ali, Faisal Kurban, Rishi Nagasar, and Yusuf Henry. Sometimes, in looking at all of the circumstances, it's a mere moment of one question or one decision or indecision on which all of those circumstances hang. I commend that circumstance or that decision was in relation to the rescue of these men. I appreciate that the Commission understands and has a clear picture of the fact that a survivor from this incident is here and present and who will tomorrow take the stand to say what happened. And I see no reason why. And the evidence of all of LMCS's persons, together with persons who would have assisted LMCS but who are not necessarily LMCS's employees or LMCS's witnesses, corroborate and would say one thing, that the likelihood of these men being alive is greater than we want to expect, meaning that they could have been here as well. Unless there is any other question.
There is actually one.
Yes.
Can you help me about this? Is it your position for your clients that the issue of Delta P was raised? And if so, where is it?
So the Delta P consideration and the methodology undertaken by Kazim Ali was addressed without being addressed. And if I can explain that.
Please do.
So earlier, my learned friend would have explained the line clearing process, whereby the liquid in the sea line was taken out, in the riser was taken out.
So I'm going to stop you,
Yes.
if I may. I don't
Yes.
want to. I just want to know, really, at this stage, because we're going to hear all this evidence.
Yes.
I just want to know at this stage whether there is any document that you can point to where LMCS, as part of its bid for the work, raised the issue of Delta P as an issue at all.
No, it was never raised as an issue at all. Please.
Right, not by you. And was it raised, as far as you're aware, in executing this work by Paria or Heritage?
No, please, Mr. Chairman.
Right, okay. Thank you. I'll give Mr. Gilbert an opportunity to say something about that if he wants to, but so it's not your case that there is a document that we can look at anywhere which suggests that this issue of Delta P was ever considered by either LMCS or Paria. That's your position?
Or specifically addressed? No,
right.
please. No,
Thank
please.
you very much. I don't know if you want to say anything about that, Mr. Gilbertson. No? Thank you very much. All right. Well, look, I appreciate your truncating your very comprehensive opening in the way in which you have, and I do appreciate it. But as I say, I will consider it in any event, all right?
I'm most grateful.
Thank you. All right. That brings us to the end of today. Unless there's anyone who wants to raise anything in particular, can I just remind everybody that the transcripts of each day's hearings will appear on the website once they're done. So, forgive me, I've forgotten the name of the person who's doing it. Kathleen Mohammed, well, she's taking down the details, and we will have the transcripts, hopefully, within a few days of each hearing. So that will all appear on the website. Everyone can go and have a look at it, see what they said, what they didn't say. If they forgot what they said, they can remind themselves, all right? So thank you very much for that. I'll ask everyone, please, now accept counsel to clear the room so that we can hear the application to be made by Mr. Gilbertson. I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask the cameras to be switched off as well, please. But we do need to record what is said for the purposes of the Commission. So the cameras off, please, but and obviously not to be dispatched to the airwaves. All right, thank you very much. So please, can we clear the public gallery and anybody not interested? Thank you very much. I'll give it a few minutes. I'll rise for 2 minutes while everyone gets a chance to clear away, all right?
This is TTT. Live for local.
Welcome to Positive Moments with Andrew and Don.
Let everything go.
That was such a life-changing experience.
It's a way of life. It's a way of being. It's a way of thinking. It is mind management.
It inspires me to know that there's more to learn every single day.